Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a sports fan in Arizona, it's been a very tough week because the Cardinal season has predictably come to an end. Uh, I'm sure you're aware of this by now, but it was an incredibly disappointing way for us to end the year. We started off the season 7-0, and then proceeded to lose 6 of the last 10, and we were, of course, blown out in our first playoff appearance in 7 years. So we waited 7 years for this, and it ended up being pretty terrible. And it's kind of interesting because disappointing fails to really capture the actual feelings of what it was like to watch the ending of this season. Watching Kyler Murray throw that interception at his own goal line was akin to undergoing an out of body experience, in which I began to question whether I was dreaming or not. I vacillated between doubting that this was real to white hot, absolute furious rage, and I think I may have even lost consciousness for a short period of time. But I held it together because I've seen way too many TikToks of adult grown men throwing sports tantrums, and I realized that I did not want to appear on the internet as thus. So I held it together and processed it like any emotionally complete human being does by staring at the TV in a comatose state and shaking my head from side to side. So, for those of you that are not from the great state of Arizona, you might not be familiar with our sports landscape out here. What I'm talking about is just the last in a very long litany of sports failures in the state of Arizona. What I like to call a situation that is very similar to Arizona sports hell, let's say. All in the valley, all the diehards, all the people that have been here for a long period of time know exactly what I'm talking to. There's a lot of bad sports moments in our state. You've got the Paxson shot, right, with the originals, with the 93 Suns. You've got the Amari Dia suspensions at the hands of Stern. You've got Stoudemire's injury. You've got the Ron Artest put back at the last second after Jay Rich didn't box out. You've got the the two toes in by Santonio Holmes in the Super Bowl. You've got the Giannis alley-oop in the finals last year after we were leading that series. And of course, this year you've got Murray's terrible flop. To put it into perspective, we as a professional sports town with 4 professional sports teams have the fewest number of possible titles of any other comparable in the country. So it's very bad. And of course, the Cardinals are the longest running franchise without a title. So there's that going for it too. So suffice to say, it is a long, painful history of pain and suffering and despair. And it's been going on for, I don't know, 70 years or something like that. So you'd think that after all this time, we would be really used to that type of suffering by now. But we're not. It still is terrible, and it's still painful. And you know why? Because there's a very specific reason why it is always terrible, and that is because we do this terrible thing to ourselves where we always get our hopes up, right? And even though the Cardinals and the NFL franchises, as an NFL franchise, are in this terrible title drought, and the Suns have never won a title, we continue to dream about the possibility of hoisting a Vince Lombardi trophy or holding that Larry O'Brien trophy over our heads. It's one of those things that you kind of fantasize about all the time, or at least I do as an avid sports fan. Or something even more insane, like the Coyotes actually having a stadium that they could call their own. But it's this idea, this thought of a championship, the dream of a championship, of a dynasty, dare we say, one day. It's that exact thought, that type of thinking that I want to talk about today. Because that type of thinking is the exact problem. It's that type of thought, an absolute infatuation with the ending, as far as we understand one, with the expectation of what's supposed to happen, with the destination that causes all the suffering and sadness in our sad little sports town. right? It's in the Buddhist thinking, you might actually call this a form of attachment, right? It's expectations. Specifically, the insatiable and, dare I say, unrealistic expectations uh, of winning all the time, right? These are nothing more than a fantasy, an attachment to how we think life is supposed to be, how we think it's supposed to go. And we keep gravitating to this idea over and over and over and over again. There's a reason that our town is, again, Arizona sports hell, and that's because in a lot of ways, it is like Buddhist hell. It is a hell of our own making. It's a hell that's built off of our desires, our hunger for more, this insatiable need to hoist this banner up, and we dwell on the losses as a result of that, the almost moments, right? The mistakes, the what ifs, what if Ainge covered Paxson? What if J-Ridge boxed out, right? Those are the things that kind of haunt us, those little mental errors, right? We needlessly pour over these over and over and over and over again because we are attached to this destination, the next thing that's supposed to happen in our minds, no matter what. Okay? And, it's kind of interesting because this is a form of self-inflicted suffering that's ultimately over something that, let's be reasonable, isn't ultimately that consequential in the long run. Sports are a form of entertainment. They're a distraction from our daily lives, those sorts of things. And the stakes at the end of the day are quite low. And yet we rack ourselves over these things over and over and over again. We suffer. This is Buddhist suffering, right? Moving endlessly from one desire to another without ever settling, right? Without ever being able to escape. And when you really put it up to the test, the desires of a sports fan are really kind of like insane to think about in the first place, right? Because there is no actual end to the desires of a sports fan. The second that you get something that you want more and more and more. The second you achieve one thing, you immediately start to pursue the next thing and plan for the next thing. I mean, let's be reasonable. Just if you break this thing down to scrutiny, if you ask the average sports fan what they want, well, they want to win. They don't want parody or challenge, conflict, right? You ask what the average baseball fan wants, but they want everybody to get a hit. They like, 1,000% batting averages, titles every year, Hall of Fame performances on a nightly basis. I mean, if you ask any Laker fan about titles, they'll basically tell you this exact point, right? They expect titles, right? Anything less than a title is a critical disappointment. They've got generations of success, right, to boast about, but never satisfied. Title or bust every single year, right? I mean, if a Patriot fan can't be happy with all their success after they flamed out this year, so then what chance do the rest of us have? There is no being satisfied in sports forever. True happiness in sports is fleeting. It's a pipe dream. It's illusory. And it's only our obsession with the vision that we keep making up over and over and over again in our minds that causes this pain. Our attachment to the idea of what it's supposed to be. It's dualistic thinking, as they call it, right? Like sports are just one avenue of this, right? From the Buddhist tradition, we talk about this as something that is the preventative thing that keeps us from becoming enlightened beings. And we see this in every aspect of our lives. We're constantly moving to the next thing in our life, clinging to the idea of what's supposed to be, what's supposed to happen next, our expectations. Our minds are constantly preoccupied with the big promotion that we're supposed to get. You can picture yourself with it, you work towards it. But even before you've got it, you're already planning the next phase of your life, the next big house you're supposed to have, right? Next big trip you're supposed to have. All these little big events that, again, aren't even formed yet. They're not there. You're not experiencing them. You're only anticipating them, and you're attached to the idea of what they're supposed to be. Okay? We try to get our kids into specific schools, get into specific committees, so you can pivot to better schools, more prestigious positions on better committees, a promotion to get a promotion to get a promotion. We make plans so that we can make additional plans. Again, they call it dualistic thinking, contingent thinking. And again, it is suffering. a cycle of endless suffering. And it's all because we have a picture of what life is supposed to be, and we spend our lives trying to make that picture a reality. And in this sense, our minds are wholly unsettled. We call it a monkey mind, a butterfly mind in other sects. It's a true reminder of how limited we are as individuals and how completely incapable we are of achieving enlightenment by means of our own efforts. I mean, realistically, the average person can't stop fixing on whatever comes next or flying off the handle when they seemingly impossible expectations are not met over and over and over again. What realistic chances do they have of becoming an enlightened being, of seeing the perfect interconnectedness of all things or understanding the universal oneness of the world that we live in? To be a Buddha, a true Buddha. Seemingly impossible. I mean, every one of us has either been or seen the angry, irrational sports fan, and it's the perfect picture of why we cannot become enlightened beings of ourselves, because there's no greater discrepancy between like the serene, peaceful Buddha and the sports fan. On the one hand, you have a sports fan who vacillates instantaneously from elation to utter dread, from jubilation to weak-willed, impotent fury, the bombastic arrogance of someone who's on the cusp of winning to absolute victimhood and excuse-making. Compare that with the Buddha, serene, calm, collected, understanding, compassionate, kind, and unfettered by all of this. When I picture the sports fan, that is the perfect picture of each and every one of us as human beings. Maybe not like, with the hat with the two kegs attached to it, or like, the big cardinal banner on it or anything like that. But the rest of it is basically who and what we are, right? Remove that person from the realm of sports, and you have me, you have you have every single one of us. But there is hope for that person and for each and every one of us in the form of the compassion of the Buddha. It's why we say the words Namo Amida Butsu, Buddha's name. We say it in gratitude for his kindness, for his wisdom, his benevolence, exactly that which allows us to transcend this cycle of life and death, this cycle of anger and expectation. It's born on the back of the Buddha's infinite life and light, not on our own. And that's important to remember, because when we see these things, we cannot help but feel a sense of humility. You cannot help but feel a sense of humbleness when you are looking at that, understanding who we are as flawed individuals compared with the compassion of the Buddha, and how much we must rely on the Buddha. That reminder is important because it intensifies the gratitude that we experience when we say the Buddha's name, right? And when we think about the teachings and the wisdom that has been bestowed upon us throughout the years. And in this sense, maybe we should say thank you to the Cardinals, right? For their awful, awful performance. Because it really is a reminder of how foolish we can be, and yet, with the help of the Buddha, the peace of mind, the clarity that we're ensured of by simply saying his name. And so, I want to say thank you to the Buddha, right? Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. But I also want to say thank you to the Cardinals. Thank you, Cardinals, for reminding me that I am a foolish person. Thank you for reminding me of my limitations. Thank you so very much for that very bad playoff performance, because it reminds us that it is not the end of the world, and we probably shouldn't get our hopes up with those sorts of things ever again. Even though, the Suns are pretty good this year. They could go all the way. They could. They just need a couple breaks. So anyway, just think about it. Thank you for joining me today. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidabits. Namo Amidabits. Namo Amidabits. Namam Daps. Namam Daps. Namam